Hey, this is your host AJ Rounds with RevRoad. I'm here with my co-host Jake McHargue from CB Vault. We're super excited for this week's episode with Jake Hawksworth and John Miller from Hypercraft. So excited to learn about their journey in helping to electrify the world, jumping onto a trend that's really helping their business grow so fast, and along the way also relocating their headquarters from Arizona to Utah. It's some really cool, we got some really cool stories in store for you and excited for this week's episode. So let's get started. All right, Jake and John, welcome this week to another episode of the Midnight Podcast, the Midnight Founders Podcast, rather. And we're here in Springville, Utah with AJ Rounds from RevRoad and Jake McHargue from Central Bank, CB Vault.
CB Vault.
Yes, we've recently rebranded and they're excited for that, right?
Heck yeah.
So let's dive into today's guests here. We've got Jake Hawksworth from Hypercraft and John Miller from Hypercraft as well. Tell us a little bit about you guys. And I, disclaimer here, I love Hypercraft. It's one of RevRoad's, and RevRoad has invested in that company. And we love what you're doing and see your work all day long. But we want the audience to hear about it too. So tell us about Hypercraft and what you're doing and your role at Hypercraft.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and thank you guys for having us. My name's Jake Hawksworth, CEO of Hypercraft. I'm one of the founders. There's 3 founders. And as a company, what we do is electric powertrains. So we're focused on, designing and manufacturing electric powertrains for all kinds of applications. They go into anything from racing vehicles to boats in the marine industry to cars, motorcycles. So cool. That's what we do as a company, and
we hear nothing about electric vehicles in this day and age we live in, right? Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's probably one of the most talked about things, and
so cool.
And it's worldwide. So we have a lot of fun doing what we're doing, and there's a huge demand for what we do as a company. And we're about overall we're almost 2 years in as a company, but we're about 7 months from a major pivot that we made, and we can talk more about that.
Love to hear it.
My name's John Miller. I'm one of the 3 founders, co-founder of Hypercraft. I'm a creative professional, been working in advertising in the worlds of power sports, action sports, outdoor industry, type of clientele over the last 20 plus years. And Hypercraft was something that started as some just passion ideas, big ideas that Jake and I were bouncing off of each other. Jake with his product background and me with a creative background, we had worked on some things together in the past, and we had this common vision for a really high performance, bespoke mountain snowmobile. And
that's cool.
That's where this whole thing kind of started. And Jake is just a genius. Like he has this vision, and he has the ability to go into 3D and model these ideas. And I'm really more of like the cultural media, creative. How do you tell the story? Who do you connect with? How do you connect? And Jake sees it that way too, but from like the product development side. And so we really just started riffing off of each other with this idea, and Jake modeled it out, and I had some relationships, influential relationships that were, professional athletes that were really excited about what we were working on, and they were kind of interjecting, some inspiration and getting us excited. And there's just all this energy building around this project, and we didn't even know that it was going to be electric in the beginning. And I think we ended up there because it was the only way to achieve how we wanted it to perform in the application that it would live in. And then we ended up with on the electric drive system as the only way to solve this problem. Yeah, and everybody wanted to see it happen, and we ran into the major roadblock of like, how are we going to do this drive system? Like, we could build the chassis, but how are we going to power it? And it made it really difficult to overcome that challenge. And so we had already had quite a bit of time into the development of this vehicle. And
yeah, and I think it's really important for everybody to know too, like Hypercraft's founding, we were going to be a small boutique brand. very limited small volume manufacturing.
Customizations.
Yeah,
things.
and just kind of like, I mean, you look at the hypercar market, the really, really high performance cars. We thought that there was a market for that in the power sports industry, right? Not taking existing production vehicles and modifying them heavily, but more of a bespoke, ground up developed vehicle, high performance. And electric was really exciting because, as we researched the technology, the changes in, the form factor, you could package battery cells together in all kinds of different shapes. And, it was like this new frontier. And as a product designer, you get excited about that from the technology side, and you're unique in the market. But it was kind of the initial steps that we took, and we just thought it was a great idea, and we started designing, like John said, and we definitely got down the path, and then we kind of turned towards the business model, and now that we knew a lot about where we were headed, how do we make it work as a business, and that's when
how do we make money, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we kind of had we had a high level business model, right, and it was kind of proven in the market. We knew that if we executed this very well, we would have the customers, and they would pay the price that we thought it should be.
The higher the price, the more the demand kind of model.
Yeah, and position yourselves high end, naturally.
Ultra high end, very, very extremely high end, and then very limited quantities. But that's where electric was kind of this double-edged sword for us, because it was the newest technology, but what we realized was it wasn't accessible to us as a company, and the
Why
cost. Not? Well, I think there's many different reasons, but without getting too much into it, but one of the biggest reasons is that all of the development of the technology for electric was really tailored towards tier 1 automotive manufacturers. Okay, so these companies would develop the product or these components or aspects of an electric drive system or a powertrain, but they weren't developing it for markets like the motorcycle industry or aftermarket automotive. So
mass quantities, not small quantities.
They were targeting Ford, GM, Volkswagen, Stellantis. And that's where they were headed.
And power sports is definitely a laggard in that realm, which they've since announced there's development going in that direction. But before,
this was 2019. And so it was kind of a different. When we look back, we'll say 2020 and 2021 were kind of the breakout years for electric worldwide. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And we made our major pivot, during that time, because we moved away from developing an electric vehicle. The other thing we realized is that the consumers are early adopters right now for electric vehicles. And, a lot of the startup companies that are trying to take vehicles to market, the volume isn't there for anybody, to dedicate that much capital and have that big of a team and manufacturing resources for that few of consumers. And so we just saw everybody kind of reinventing the wheel everywhere in the EV market, because everybody's trying to design their own powertrain. Yeah. And we said, well, for internal combustions, all the gas and diesel engines, there's companies that specialize in this. Not everybody has to go design an engine. You can go buy it from a company, And that's when we first kind of looked at where the big gap was. And the hard pivot for us as a company was going from a small kind of lifestyle brand or lifestyle company, boutique, to a scalable and high growth business opportunity.
Was that a hard transition to make, like, mentally? Because I think about like things that I've started or projects that I've started, and it's really difficult sometimes because you get so invested, right, in like the idea or the process that you're going through, that it's hard to make those pivots.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could interview, and unfortunately, the third founder, Eric, isn't here. So, the original, the first moments of Hypercraft was I left the company that I was at, and Eric, who I'd known for a long time, came and said, if we're going to build a company, now's the time. And when we talked about doing a snowmobile, then I said, well, we're not going to do this without somebody like John Miller, who came from Polaris, and the market intelligence, the marketing strength, and everything. We knew we'd have to have that. So there's three of us, and I think we all three had different views and perspectives on it. And I'll let John kind of speak for himself. But the other thing you have to remember is we we were working through early 2020 on this. And Eric, the third founder, was leaving medicine, and then COVID hit. And, he felt like he had an obligation.
He's based in California, right?
He's in Reno, Nevada.
Oh,
Yep.
Reno, Nevada. Okay.
And he's in emergency medicine. He's an ER doctor, and his wife is too. So, he was like, I can't leave medicine now as the world goes into a global, pandemic.
And doctors are high in demand, right?
Oh, super high in
every
demand.
corner.
And he felt, he's there to help people, right? Save lives and everything like that. So it was a really interesting time as we kind of the world shut down, and we thought we were going to go raise capital to build snowmobiles in March of 2020, and the economy collapsed.
And then one of your founders decides, hey, I better stay doing what I'm doing.
Yep.
That's a midnight founders moment.
Well, I think
right
we
there,
thought
right?
the economy was going to collapse. There was a lot of things that we didn't know.
Well, the stock market plummeted in March of 2020, and we had there was a couple, we had one very high net worth individual, which I won't say his name because I think everybody would know who he is. He's from Utah, but very much in power sports, and we did an introduction, and we had a meeting set up, and it was beginning of April 2020, and he's like, we just found out, or he told us, I just laid off 2,300 people. And so
that's a midnight moment for sure.
Yeah. So then you're, for us, and it's, and when you start with these concepts, you don't, you're working another job, right? You always have something for money. For me,
you had another company yourself, right?
Well, at the same time we started Hypercraft, I started a product design company.
Okay.
That eventually was turned into kind of another opportunity with another partner that I did all through 2020 into 2021. And that for me was paying the bills. And so when you kind of asked Jake if, for us, was it hard to let go of the original idea? There's like so much other stuff that was happening. Yeah. But I remember having conversations because when we got focused on powertrain, it was in phases. Like it's not this big shift. It was a process. It was like we have this one, so let's call it a power unit that could power a snowmobile. Well, then it's like, well, what else can it power? A motorcycle, a UTV, an ATV. And it's like, okay, well, we'll make it for our snowmobile, but let's go find anybody else that we can sell it to. Right?
We were still hanging on to, we're going to build the snowmobile. Okay. And it was still sort of a pivotal piece of the whole, or cornerstone, I guess you could say, of the whole equation. Yeah. But it was funny. I'll never forget where I was sitting, and I guess I forgot what I was wearing, but it was a moment where Jake called me, and I thought we were done. We hit this like moment where it was like, we're going to need $20 million, 15 engineers to build this drive system. Like, we're done, and Jake calls me, and he kind of goes back through the whole process that we just went through. And I'm like, yeah, Jake, yeah, 20 million, we're done. Like, what, well, what? And he's like, well, how many other people in the world are trying to build a vehicle right now, whatever it is? They can build a chassis, they can go and buy a gas motor of various size and output, but they want electric. And they can't get it, and they're in the same position that we're in right now. How many people are out there like that? And I was like, oh. And that was, for me, that was the moment where it was like, oh, this is big.
But even then, I mean, I think like this, like from that moment, it still took, almost a year to let go of the vehicle.
The snowmobile.
Right? Yeah, the snowmobile.
Perfect snowmobile.
Right? We're still going to build the snowmobile.
Yeah, that's John, I want to ride this
but
snowmobile.
it'll be like a project that
we can show you guys what it looks like. It's, we show some people because it's really, really cool. Yeah, so you can tell. I was actually going to say that. John still hasn't let go.
I'll sign up to
the
beta
first
test.
one. Yeah. No, I hope to see it done someday, but I let go of it right away because the one thing that I realized, so like if you look at, from like my background is at 18, I had an opportunity to start a company with my parents and my older brother, right? So I kind of was like entrepreneur from day one. But and it was like, 15 years of doing that, self-capitalized and definitely a small business, right? I mean, we had 50 employees, we manufactured, and, did a lot. And we were in the power sports industry. That's how I met John and Eric. But what I experienced, especially like you take a look at the first 5 years of starting a company. Like I lived through how hard that was, and I got a taste for what that's like. So,
and you're like, give me more. I want more.
I think over time, what it did to me was like, okay, if I'm going to do this again, it's got to be a really big idea. Okay. And I was very passionate about the snowmobile and the technology and everything. But I think why I transitioned faster than everybody else was like, look, we're going to go through pain no matter what, right? Like, and a lot, like, I mean, just to be honest, I even told my wife, when we started, I'm like, I don't want you to have a misconception of what this is going to be. This is going to be the hardest thing that we've ever done, right? Like, it going in. Now some people are naive, and I think that helps. Like if you're naive, it helps because you don't know but I knew what I was going into. So I needed it to be, I kind of realized like, I need this to be a very big idea. And, I got more excited about high growth and scalable. Now I've never started a high growth scalable company before. And I think we realistically believe that, Hypercraft as a company is capable of, $1 billion plus in revenue, right? Now we don't know sitting here today how we get there. Right. We're on this adventure. We're on this journey right now. We're at the beginning.
But you're starting with boats, right? That's where you're going first. Is that right?
Well, I mean, we started with automotive, really.
Our first customer was a marine client, though.
Yeah, I mean, technically it was, so we're doing an electric drive system for an airboat company in Texas, a manufacturer. And we can kind of get into the RevRoad relationship because that was really the breakthrough moment for Hypercraft is when we met RevRoad. Because I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, you don't know what to do first and everything has to happen in parallel.
It's overwhelming. There's so much coming at you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have instant team. You don't have instant resources. You don't have instant advice, and it takes time to build relationships. But, with RevRoad, all of that was high quality and about as instant as you can get. It was incredible for us. And, that was the first time that we really committed as a company to focus on electric powertrains. And we did that. We started with RevRoad, and now we're just over 7 months in, and things have been very transformational for us.
Very cool.
And, another good thing to say about RevRoad is, I mean, it's like there's all these things that we had, call them assets or talent or luck or gifts or natural gifts. But what RevRoad for me really helped us with is like it cut through the clutter of like there's all these things that we have to organize and set up and address and figure out and with RevRoad it was like clarity, like do this, then do this, then do that. And it was like it just kind of helped us like focus on the right things at the right time and instead of trying to do everything all at once. That's what really stood out to me.
And we're excited to see what Hypercraft can do. This is going to be really, really, it's going to be a fun ride for all of us, isn't it?
Yep, for sure.
Cool.
It has been.
I'm going to throw out a question here, and Jake's going to throw out a couple too. But what's maybe the gnarliest thing you guys have done as entrepreneurs to date? Crazy story. Before
Hypercraft or even
Hypercraft before? I don't know. It probably doesn't matter. This is about Midnight Founders, right? Which both of you are. Is there some crazy story or something really interesting? Or, I mean, we've heard all kinds of stories, like driving all through the night to get a shipment there on time or whatever the case may be. And just there's fun stories.
Like a 36-hour without sleeping. Like trying to solve a
5
problem.
gallons of coffee in 10 minutes because you got to go on stage or something.
For me, I would say that long before Hypercraft, like the years that, when I met Jake is when I kind of took a leap into being self-employed and trying to put ideas out into the world and self-fund and self-motivate, those initiatives. And, there's all the insecurity of being, the weight of everything is on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And you have to survive and thrive and strategize and manufacture, assemble, distribute, ship, taxes.
Many hats, right?
And Like I had been through like an IRS audit. That was pretty brutal. It lasted a few years, and I'm a creative. I'm not, you know, a left brain or organizational accountant type. And that was pretty brutal for me. But, you know, I think kind of just stepping back from all the brutal things, like you kind of get into a phase where you get comfortable in turbulent, you know, times or environments.
What is it saying? You're comfortable with the uncomfortable. Is
Yeah,
that what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and for me, that's how I can hang on to the rocket that we're on now, is because I was already uncomfortable, kind of, you know, operating lean and you know, and into the unknown, and having faith that, you know, if you just keep doing it, everything reveals itself. You know, you always have what you need, and you know, and you just get through day by day, and then at some point you look back and you're like, wow, I just climbed a mountain. I didn't even realize that we were, you know, we've come so far, you know. So, and I feel like Jake and I sort of had that in common.
Cool.
From the get-go.
Cool.
But
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, you know, I mean, we all know starting a business can be brutal. And I mean, for me, the brutal moments are personal, but, you know, it's kind of what you just go through. I think, like, after, you know, I've done a lot of really cool things. You know, I mean, I've tested, you know, snowmobile components in Patagonia and Chile, you know, and,
Wow.
you know, and but the craziest thing, I think, and I just did this Middle East trip, which was really
You just got
mind-numbing.
back.
Yeah, I just got back, and you know, the Saudi government invited me to come to the F1 race. So that was just a really cool moment because they're very interested in EV and they wanted to meet. And so they're like, come to the F1 race in Jeddah, you know, right on the Red Sea, and here's VIP access and all these crazy things. But I mean, I was, you know, the travel schedule and the time change and everything, you're like, I mean, this is the longest. I mean, I think I was up for 53 hours, you know, all at once, you know, to, you know, with a couple, like you've got, you know,
An hour.
it was an hour and a half flight, you know, from Dubai, you know, to Saudi, you know, that kind of thing. But the coolest moment for me was last fall. We got invited to be at Velocity Invitational, this racing event, and it's kind of, you don't always know how you get to where you get, but the most meaningful thing about anything that you do in business is the people and the relationships that you build, because people build businesses. You know, the way we use resources is just, it's all about people. And so that's what I love. And I like working. I mean, if we could have 10,000 employees tomorrow, I would do it. You know, I just love seeing people go to work and do what they do well. But it's also meeting the people that have impact in your life. And so, you know, we're in Laguna Seca in California, or at the Laguna Seca racetrack in Monterey. And I'm eating dinner with Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford.
That's cool.
After speaking on a panel discussion with him and Zach Brown, the CEO of McHargue.
Not the same guy in Ford versus Ferrari, right?
Not the same guy, no. But
Just kidding.
yeah, it's just kind of like the moments really sneak up on you, and you look back and you're like, man, how did, like, that's so wild that you end up in that moment. But it was really fun.
And he was actually listening to what you're saying and engaged and excited to hear about what you're doing, right?
I don't know if was that your impression of it?
I'm
I mean,
sure he
dinner.
was.
So when I had dinner with him, it was epic. Like, and he's the nicest guy, and he gave me some really good advice. And he told me, look, you spend all of your time and energy trying to get to the next level, but you never think about what you do and who you'll be at the end when you finally arrive. Spend time thinking about that, you know, because he worked up. He came from Toyota, and then he eventually worked all the way up in Ford to become CEO. And he said, when that moment came, I realized I wasn't prepared to be CEO. You know, and I think he's an incredible CEO of Ford, and I think what they're doing is incredible. But he, you know, it was just really interesting advice. So but during the panel discussion, that was a different deal, and I don't know if they were really 100% welcome and warming.
I don't know. I felt like they were in their own realms trying to get their own agendas across, and it wasn't about, you know, whether, you know, Jake was qualified to be there. It's like everybody had something that they were pushing for in their own realm, and that's what they were just more focused on, what they were trying to get across. But it was super cool. Yeah, it's funny how, I don't know. I mean, we've come across and rubbed elbows with some pretty incredible people. I mean, just in the last year through all of this, how many billionaires have we met now? I had never met a billionaire before Hypercraft started,
No.
Good.
And the cooler thing is, you get opportunities to solve problems for billionaires, now. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride for us.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. I want to wakeboard behind one of these electric boats at some
Yeah,
point.
right.
I can just think about not being able to hear the boat while you're wakeboarding, and that sounds fun.
But don't you have to eat? What did you have? Frogs or something to get this guy to close the deal, or what was the story there? I remember.
Yeah, we went down to Texas to meet with the airboat manufacturer.
They're airboats. They got those big
Yeah,
fans
the
on
big
the
fans on
back.
the
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny how you really focus in on, and we're kind of in the midst of it. Like, this is a really, really, kind of critical time for us, but you don't get a lot of sleep. And that's like one of the things that sticks with you. You have to be willing to go long times without sleep. But yeah, we got down there, hard travel schedule. And then at like 11 o'clock at night, they're like, let's go out into the swamp and go hunting for bullfrogs. And we did that until like 2 a.m. It was crazy. And then the next day,
awesome.
the next day they fried them up and we ate frog legs.
Nice.
Well, it is funny because, on that trip, it occurred to me very quickly, and I think I commented to Jake at some point, like, do you realize what we're going to be doing for the rest of our lives? We're going to be test driving the most exotic vehicles all over the world,
Yeah, that's a good point.
and
That's a cool thing to have happen.
and that's an exciting thing. And and right after that, we were test driving the rallycross race cars out on the track, and it's cool because we get to go out and and then we were out at Velocity. We're on the racetrack with media credentials and meeting people. Like, we went to a party that in an airplane hangar, and they had these like jets on display as if it was like at the mall you see like an Audi dealership like has a
what were they saying? Electrify these, right?
well, no, it's just like they had jets on display at
cool.
this party as if like everybody
While
at the
you're
party
having
could
your,
buy one of these,
the charcuterie board or whatever, and, like, you're picking, you can just go walk into
Take one of these home in your bag, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, you can go look at what
Here's
your
a
next jet
flyer
purchase.
for a brand new Learjet.
Yeah.
right?
great.
No big deal.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So obviously, you guys have been doing this for a little while. There's probably a million lessons that you've learned that were probably really difficult in the time. When you're going through it and learning the lesson, those are probably hard days. But looking back, do you have any advice, or is there like a lesson that you learned that you would love to share with new founders that are getting ready to start their companies?
Yeah, I mean, that's always one of the most challenging questions to answer, right? And I think for me, it's hard to feel like I'm in a position to give that type of advice. But, I think, the first thing is, to really understand who you are, because who you are is kind of what kind of business you're going to be good at. If you're an entrepreneur, you kind of know it. But there's different types of businesses, and I was in a small business for a really long time, and I realized it just wasn't a fit for me. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I would say is, because we can talk about, like, tons of other things, like you guys know, there's so many, even big lessons, and things to understand. But I think at the end of the day, if it's, it's not a fit for everybody. And
entrepreneurship in general.
Well, yeah, and the type of business, like, and what your role is. Like, don't try to be something that you're not.
That's good advice.
And
I like that.
yeah, and you I think if you can kind of soul search first, you're going to get through the hardest times a lot better, because the energy that we have as entrepreneurs comes from when we're operating within the genius that we have. Like, everybody has a genius, and what comes most naturally to you is where you want to be. And it's not, I don't think it's the same as, like, for me, it's not the same as, pick something that you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right? It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, work is work.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Relentlessness is one of our core values at Hypercraft for a reason.
I like that.
Because if you like, at the end of the day, if you have a good idea and fairly good timing and you don't quit, you make it. That's it. Like, I think that's the simplest form to me is like, yeah, there's a couple key things that you have to have right, but you know, you're going to fail 10,000 times and you're going to learn 10,000 lessons. But if you don't know who you are and really what you're good at and where you should be in a company or in your role, like even for me as a, quote unquote CEO, I'm constantly, as we grow, even saying, is this a good fit for me? And as soon as I realize maybe
takes
it's
a lot of kind of gut chat and soul searching and
well,
vulnerability, right?
You've kind of got to kill your ego a little bit.
Yeah.
I think so, but it's I know that's where my happiness is going to be, and also where the highest impact is. Like, I'm all about impact. I got one life, and every day I get to choose what I do with my time and my energy and the relationships and everything. I want to have the most impact I can in the world, positive impact. Okay, I'll just make sure it's not. I don't want negative. I don't want negative impact. I mean, if that's, for me, like John and I were just talking about this, if that for me is sitting down on a computer and doing CAD modeling, and I can have the highest impact for Hypercraft doing that, then that's what I want to be, because there's probably a ton of great CEOs. But if I can have the highest impact for Hypercraft as a CEO and I enjoy doing it, then I'm going to stay doing it. So I think that soul searching and knowing who you are is probably the biggest lesson.
I think that's incredible advice. Yeah. Being able to have that level of introspection and being willing to like check your ego, like you said, John, I think that's incredible advice.
But is there an element, and maybe this is a good question for John, is there an element of trial and error, kind of trying a few things out to see where that passion
and actually
lies?
that's a good segue for what I wanted to build on what Jake was saying is, and I think one of the secret ingredients of why Hypercraft is performing the way it is we have an incredible team of people who I think have matured in their own ways before this point. And we all know who we are, and we've all learned our lessons, and we all bring something unique to the table. So there's no, sometimes there's there's an overlap of skill set or vision, or where we might trip over each other, but we actually complement each other really well. There's no like redundancy where we're competing with anybody else like in our realm. So like the people that have showed up, like we all kind of bring like a more holistic perspective and experience to the table, and that's what's I think allowing us to expand the way that we are, because it's being handled in all these different realms are being handled simultaneously. But at the way that it's all working though is that we all align to a vision as well. So I think having a clear vision of where you're going and the values that you're operating on,
relentlessness,
and then it creates that that law of attraction that we're all here operating on the same why, like what gets us out of bed in the morning. Why do we care enough to put ourselves out there and take this big leap together?
And to your point specifically, like I think it can happen at 18, and I think for some people it happens at 25. Like I was in a family business, I was very dedicated to the family business, and after 15 years I left and I realized like, okay, I learned so much, but I realized I don't, I was somebody different, right? So for me, it happened at 33, and for some people it might be 18, but it's all who you have in your life, and everybody's journey is a little bit different. So I think it's just if you're really going all in, if you're a founder and entrepreneur, and I think you're really going all in on something that you believe in, take that moment and just say, who am I? Because there's a lot of great ideas in the world, but as we know, very few make it. And I think there's a couple factors, but that might be a big one.
Another one of our values is fearlessness. Be fearless, and that's Jake Jake's an all-in kind of guy, and he's a great, role model for that spirit. And I think we all live that in some way. But look, we don't have it all figured out right now. And anybody who's jumping into the abyss, jumping off the cliff and building the airplane while they're falling, whether they're 18 and less experienced or, wherever they are in their maturity or career or whatever, look, you just got to throw yourself out there, put it into the universe and ask for what you want and go after it, regardless of what you don't know. And it might crash and burn.
Yeah.
But
that's hard for people, isn't it? Really,
the experience that you gain from that is exponential. Like I mentioned my IRS audit. Like,
what did you do, John, to have one of those happen?
Well, I'm just horrible at accounting was the problem. But I'll tell you what, I know a lot more about finance from that experience.
Yeah.
And, the way that I sort of justified it in the back, like after it was all over, was, I could have paid $10,000 for an accounting class at college and become an expert at it. Or I could pay the IRS $10,000 for the same lesson. And it's like, one way or the other, you're going to get the experience,
That's right.
And so even when the things that happen that you don't want to happen, you learn so much, and then you take that experience to the next thing that you do, and you're that much better, So it's kind of like embracing.
So he's going to offload the CFO responsibilities as soon as possible.
Well, needless to say, John doesn't do any finances.
Smart decision. I'm sure John likes that too, right?
Oh,
No,
yeah.
that's what we're talking about, right? Like, John is a genius. Like, what the world, how the world will change now that John is a part of Hypercraft is so exciting for me to watch play out, because he's doing for Hypercraft his genius thing. His role is there, and that we all have to find that, and sometimes it does take time, but I think if that's what you're looking for, you'll do it. And my favorite quote is from Thomas Edison, and he said, "Everything works out in the end, and if it hasn't worked out, it's not the end."
I love that.
And I think that's it. Like, just stay in it.
It's cool. Well, speaking of end, we probably ought to wrap up. This has been so fun, John and Jake, and I think that if you guys are okay with it, we'd love to have you on the show again and talk more about what's next for Hypercraft, because I'm sure there's lots of cool things you guys are working on. So where can the audience find out more about Hypercraft? Tell us where to go.
So hypercraftusa.com or on our social channels at hypercraftusa.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. That was fun.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, honestly.
Yeah.
It was
Thanks
nice
for
to meet
having
you
us.
guys.
Great information.
Excited to see what happens with Hypercraft.